Welcome everyone to our evening session on horn makers. Tonight it is my pleasure to introduce you to your panelists for this discussion. We have Bernard Scully, horn soloist, former member of Canadian Brass, artistic director of Kendall Betts Horn Camp, and associate professor of horn at the University of Illinois. We also have Jesse McCormick, second horn of the Cleveland Orchestra, member of the Factory Second Brass Trio, horn professor at Baldwin Wallace Conservatory, and associate artistic director of Betts Horn Camp. Next, we have on the phone this evening, due to a few technical issues in his area, is John Gough of Elemental Brass in Loveland, Colorado. Say hello, John.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks so much, John. Next is Aaron Beck of Beck Brass Works and Lawson Brass Instruments in Wellesley Hills, Massachusetts. This session is brought. There he is.
Sorry, delayed.
No worries. This session is brought to you by, as part of the online KBHC experience, our gift to the horn community. Before we begin, please take a moment to familiarize yourself with the controls at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to ask questions to our panelists in the Q&A. Questions posed to the Q&A can be upvoted by clicking on the thumbs up icon that appears below each question. Additionally, you will be able to interact with all attendees and panelists and enjoying the content being presented. However, if you have a specific question, please try to add it to our Q&A rather than the chat, as your awesome and insightful questions may be missed in the chat. Additionally, please note that comments posted in the chat may be toggled to be viewed by all panelists or all panelists and attendees. Your panelists are myself, Bernard, Jesse, Aaron, and John. You post a comment, however, to the all panelists and attendees, everyone viewing today's session will be able to see what you've written. With this in mind, please use discretion as you interact with us tonight. And thank you for your attendance. Now I'm excited to pass you off to our very wonderful gentlemen, Bernard and Jesse.
Thanks, Chelsea. Hi, everybody. So excited you all are here with us tonight. So excited that Aaron and John are with us. Thanks, guys, so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Looking forward to it.
I'm glad that Jesse and I can be here. How's it going, Jesse?
Well, thanks. Yeah, we're glad to have Aaron and John as our guests this evening, and the rest of you as well. Glad that you could join us. So, Bernard, do you want to tell us a little bit about what the background of this evening and the history of the camp there?
Yes, indeed. So back to the very beginnings of the camp in 1995, Walter Lawson, who was one of Kendall Betts' mentors, and many of you know Walter as one of the greatest horn makers of all time, and certainly horn repairman, a genius in his own right, really revolutionized horn design in America. I played a Lawson horn for many years, and Kendall was one of Walter's proteges and worked hand in hand with Walter to create many of his horns. And so Kendall would have Walter come to the horn camp to talk to the students, the campers, about horn making, about horn maintenance, and he would give lots of information. And when I was a young student, that was the first time I had ever heard all of that detailed information. So we're really excited because this class tonight is very much in line with the history. And Aaron, of course, now is the heir to the Lawson Brass Factory. You apprenticed under Walter, right, Aaron?
Yeah, I did a lot of work with Walter. He would show me how to make something, and then he'd have me make a couple hundred for the shop then. So, yep, I learned hand in hand with him.
So it's a wonderful legacy. Thanks for being with us. And John is a horn camper, and John is a horn maker in his own right. I've got the pleasure of playing some of John's horns. And I got to say, they're just some of the best horns I've ever played. So we're so pleased that these two gentlemen with such a close tie to the camp and to people that have been associated with the camp can speak with us tonight. So I think tonight we're going to start with you, Aaron, and you're going to talk about horn maintenance, right?
Yeah, just kind of how to take care of your horn and make it last the longest you can.
All right, well, I'll let you have at it then.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So this is, first I'll just show you guys really quick. I'll lift up my little thing. This is the shop. So we do everything in here from making screws for horns to making the entire instrument. We spin the bells in the back, the workbenches, we make up the bell tails, make up the first branches, the pipes, the valves. That's all done here. And a lot of times what I get is people coming in with kind of minor problems that can be prevented a lot of times. And you can make your instrument last a lot longer if you just do a couple things. And it's not the most exciting thing, but the first thing is just oiling your valves. That's probably the number one problem that comes in here is just people that don't oil their valves will wear out very quickly. And it's an easy thing to do. I sent a pamphlet out, it should be posted on the website there on just general maintenance you should do. And number one is just oiling your valves at least once a week. You want to be oiling everything, the top bearing, the bottom bearing, and the valve casing as well is a good way to go. The more oil, the merrier. And then, once every once in a while, like every 3 or 4 months, I recommend pouring oil even down the pipe just to cover the inside of your horn with oil. This will prevent things from sticking to your slides and your inside your pipe to prevent red rot. If it's coated in a thin coat of oil, like you can use lamp oil or valve oil, that'll help that slow down and make your horn last a considerable amount longer. The next thing that I was going to talk about is just tools that every player should have in their case. If you're going, just like when you go to rehearsal and you have a pencil in your case, a great thing to have too in your case is a little bag with some small tools that you can use in case of an emergency. I carry this little bag with me, and some of the stuff that I have in it are just a little screwdriver. These are always handy to have just in case you need to tighten something down or something comes loose and you need to fix it. This is a tool that's used to tap in and out the valves. All it is a piece of wood. It's a wood dowel with a 7/16 hole drilled in it. So when you need to put the valve back in the casing, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later, this is a tool you'd use, and it's something that's easy to do. The other thing that's nice to have in your case in case you have an emergency is rotor bumper, the little bumpers for your horn. I have a couple pre-cut ones in here and then a length of cord as well. So if I need to cut one on the fly. I also put a little razor so that I can cut it when it's in there. And the final thing that I have in my little bag of goodies is some string. It's just, this is braided Dacron. They use it for fly fishing. And it's a great thing to have in there, and that's what you'd use to restring your horn. That thing alone has saved me in the past. When I was in college doing my undergrad degree, I was playing Brahms' Second Piano Concerto, and I went to walk out on stage. I was playing first horn, the solo before the piano comes in, and I walked out on stage, and as I was walking on, I was wiggling my valves, and one of the strings popped on my horn. Luckily in my case, I had this stuff, and I was able to go to the side, unscrew the old string, replace it, and get the horn working before the concert started. If that was something that I had never done before or something I wasn't familiar with, it would have been a lot more difficult to get the show going on time and would have been more of a problem. But that's something that I learned when I learned how to restring a valve when I was in junior high. And that's something that I'm going to show you how to do today too. And that's a great skill to know. The two skills I'm going to show you today are restringing a valve and how to remove and reinstall a valve. Those are both things that everybody should know how to do. It's not particularly hard to do, and it's something that's easy to do. And it's a good thing to practice first, either at your home or at a shop that somebody can show you, supervise you if you want. But it's just a mechanical device. There's nothing magical about the valves on the horns. They're designed to come in and out, and they come in and out all the time in the shops. And it's something you can do yourself. So with that being said, I think we'll just jump right into it now. And we're going to pull out a valve, and I'll show you how to do it. And then I'll show you how to put it back in as well. And then I'll show you how to restring a valve. All right, here we go. So I'm going to flip the camera down now so you can see the horn a little bit better. So the first thing when you're restringing a valve, I usually start with it on my lap. We're going to take out the first valve today. So I'm going to take off the cap. I'm going to flip the horn over. If you were in like a concert setting, there's a couple ways to take out your valves. If you're in a concert setting and you're worried about time and you don't have all the tools, again, the first thing you should have is a screwdriver. If you back out the screw a couple turns, another thing that's great to have, but not usually in your case, but usually you can find as a stage manager is a rawhide hammer or any kind of hammer. If you're in a hurry and you don't have the right tools, you can just back the screw out a couple turns and you can give it a tap. That'll knock the bearing out the top. But if you have time and you do have the right tools, which I'll show you they are now, you can either use this as a drift, and basically all you're going to be doing is using it to tap out the valve, or this is a little drift I just made up just to fit this valve. It's a little tool that either you can make up or a shop could make up for you pretty easy. And all this does is it's going to fit between the stop arm and where the screw went in the hole there. And it's going to drop right in. I'm going to give it a little tap. I'm going to support the valve underneath with my hand so that I'm not going to push the horn down. Actually, I'm going to use my lap today because I'm sitting awkwardly. I'm going to give it a tap. And now when I flip the horn over, if all went to plan, the bearing will come off the top. So this is the top bearing. Yours will look similar to this. They almost always have a little notch in them for lining up afterwards. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the valve out. So now that I've got the valve out completely, typically if you're going to pull a valve out, usually you probably have a problem, like they feel gritty or grimy. And you just want to make sure you wipe it off, see what's going on. You want to make sure there's nothing inside the casing. Like I've seen people with brushes getting stuck in their casings and you'll have a little bit of the brush left in there. But all I'm doing is wiping it off really quick just to make sure there's no foreign objects in there. So I'll wipe off the valve and I'm going to put it aside on top of a soft towel. And then I'm going to wipe out the casing as well. And to do this, I'm just going to make a little pokey piece with my towel. I'm going to put it through the hole on the bottom. And then I'm going to run through just to clean out the back bearing, make sure there's nothing in there. And I'm also going to wipe out the casing. All right, so the valve is out. I've made sure there's nothing stuck in there, nothing strange. Now I'm going to put it back in. And this is a great opportunity to heavily oil a valve now that it's out. So what I'm going to be doing is on the spindle shaft here, I'm going to put a little drop of this is heavy oil on the top and bottom of the shaft. Then I'm going to use a light oil. I'm going to flood the rest with the light oil, the valve itself. I'm going to put it back in. And again, I'm going to flood it again just to make sure it's got more than enough valve oil on there. And then I'm going to put the bearing on. And this is usually the point where most people get nervous. All we're doing is lining the bearing back up. And then these bearings, I don't know if it's going to be able to see on here, but there's a little mark on the top. And I want to line that up with the mark on the casing. And once it's lined up, I can press fit it in a little bit because it'll fit slightly in there. And then I'm going to use that same tool I just talked about. This one's been used a lot more, so it's a little darker. But it's just a piece of wood. It's a wood dowel you can buy at the store. And it just has a hole drilled in it. It's 7/8 of an inch. And that'll fit on top of the valve. You can see it there. And that way, when I tap it in, the whole bearing will get knocked in together. It won't go in crooked. So I'm going to use my little rawhide mallet. These are the best thing to use. You can use them for a lot of different things in your horn, like helping get out stuck slides or fixing a dent mouthpiece. I'll show you that too. But if you didn't have one of these, it's okay because you got a wood dowel. You could use a metal one, but you just need to be gentle. You just tap it in. And again, you're going to support it on the back side and make sure that you don't hit it too hard. Just tap it down. And you'll hear how the pitch changed once it went all the way down. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to manually rotate the valve from the back to make sure everything's spinning properly. I'm just spinning it by hand. There are some horns when you tap the bearing down, the bearing is actually too tight and then it goes too far. And to fix that, the easiest thing to do is just put your valve cap back on. And then you're going to give it just a soft tap on the back. And the valve cap's going to keep the whole thing from falling out, but it'll loosen up the bearing a little bit. And so if it was stuck in there, you can just give it a little tap. And then you can make sure it spins again, and this spins freely. Now, if your string was intact, all you'd have to do is put the stop arm back on. And it just twists around and it goes back on. And then you'd put the screw back in. And then it works properly and you can put the screw back in. But for our purposes, we're going to pretend like our string broke. Again, this is something that happens frequently. These are strings and they do break. So I'm going to take the string off that's in here and I'll redo it with a new length of string. Again, I use braided Dacron. It's a product that you can buy at most fishing stores, you can buy online, and you're going to buy a spool of 50 yards and it'll last you the rest of your life, and every other horn player you know's life too. So you start off with a straight piece of the braided Dacron. Mine's black. I heated up the end with a match just so that it would melt the wire a little bit and not fray. Now what I do is I make a hoop. It's just a little hoop. I'm gonna put my finger in there, I'm gonna twist it around 2 times. And that's gonna make it so there's a big knot at the end and it won't pull through the lever. I just pull it through. And now I have a little knot. Now I'm gonna put this through the horn. There's, in the packet that I handed out, there's a drawing of how to do this as well. All you're gonna do is you're gonna pull it through the hole. You can always look at one of your other valves if you needed a reference point. But it's not particularly a difficult thing to do, but it's something that I think is necessary for everybody to learn how to do. So I run it through, and before we do that, I'm gonna put this screw back in that we didn't tighten up. So let me put this screw in real quick. Okay, so the screw's down. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go around the valve, and I'm going to go around the screw like a figure 8. So again, I went around, then around the screw, then back around the valve. And now I'm going to go through the other hole so I can put it into the stop screw on the back. I'll run this through. The other thing I did with this string before I started was I also heated up this end and drew it out with my finger to make it a point. That way it makes it easier to go in the holes. And when you're rushing to get on stage and you're a little nervous, it's nice to have more done than not. What I'm doing now is I'm just setting the height of the levers. So what I want to do is make this lever match the others so that it's pretty close at this point. And then I'm going to set the string. So right now it's pretty close to the correct height. Actually, it is the correct height. And I'm going to do screw in the set screw. And what this is going to do is lock the string in place. And now I can let go. And then I'm going to wrap it around this other screw, and that'll hold the string so it doesn't fall off the horn. And usually what I do on a horn like this that has half mechanical levers, if I push this out slightly while I'm screwing it in, that'll relieve a little tension. If it's too tight, the valve sometimes will get hung up. If it's too loose, this will bounce up and down. So what you want to do is just push it away just a little bit on the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it out, and I'm going to screw the screw in. Okay, and then I just check it to make sure that it can move a little bit, but it's not a ton, and the valve's moving properly. And now I've got this really long piece of string, so I'm going to cut that off. And if you have a lighter or a match, you can heat this up, and that'll melt it a little bit and make it look a little more better, presentable, and it won't fray. But that's all there is to doing a valve. And again, I put the instructions with the camp, and they posted it, I think, online, so you could look at it. But now everything's working as it should again. And I have a valve that I cleaned out and then or wiped down and then put back in the horn. Again, it's just a simple thing, but it's something that could save you in a time where you're in the middle of an audition or a concert and you just need to fix something really quickly, like you had a problem. And it's just an easy skill to know. So again, it's good to get some kind of little bag to put stuff in, and then have some tools in there, especially string and a screwdriver. Those are going to be your biggest friends. And some stop arm bumpers are also nice too. The other thing I talked about briefly was using a rawhide mallet on a mouthpiece. This is something you can do, or your shop should be able to do for you too. But often mouthpieces get damaged, and the back bore of the mouthpiece will get out of round. If you do drop your mouthpiece and it gets out of round, don't keep putting it back in your horn, because when you dent something, not only is it dent in that one spot, but the other spots actually go up, get raised up. And when every time you put that into your receiver, it'll damage the receiver, and it'll start to get larger and larger than your mouthpiece when it's back to round, won't fit properly. So it's easiest to just take it to a shop and then have them re-round it. Or if you have the tool, all you need is a mouthpiece backboard tool. This is also something that's easily obtainable. Most shops will have it, or they'll sell one to you, but it's an easy tool to get. So basically all you're doing is putting that in the backbore, and then with your rawhide hammer again, you would just be tapping it around the edge to knock down the high spots until it gets back to normal size. And again, there we go, back to normal. It doesn't take long, and it's something easy enough to do. You can do it yourself, or a shop can do it. The other thing on maintenance is not really about your horn, it's about your mouthpiece. Just like the dent in the back of your mouthpiece, it's important that your mouthpiece is in good shape. I've had a couple players come in with zinc poisoning, and they're usually getting it from the rim of their mouthpiece. Most mouthpieces are yellow brass underneath, and that contains zinc. It also contains lead. And what happens every time you drop your mouthpiece is a little bit of the plating comes off. And it's hard to see here, but if you lose the plating and there's raw brass showing, you're best to either get a new mouthpiece or get your old mouthpiece replated, so you don't suffer from zinc poisoning. Some people won't suffer for a long time, and then all of a sudden you'll have a problem. And it's something that's easily avoidable, and a good way to keep yourself healthy and keep everybody else, you playing, and everybody else happy. Other things that I was going to talk about a little bit was just other repairs you can do at home yourself. Again, those are restring your valve. That's something easy. The other thing is to snake out your mouth pipe occasionally. You can either use a brush or you can use a silk. There's now strings, the Yamaha makes them, and some other people, and it's just like a clarinet swab. And you're just going to run it down your pipe. You can also run it down your slides if you choose. And that's a good way to get gunk out of there if you have anything stuck to it. And then you can re-oil the horn and make sure it's coated in oil again, and that'll make it last a lot longer. But anyway you go, typically most horn players every 1 to 2 years need to get their horns professionally taken care of, just to keep the crud from building up in the horn, and to get any of the lime or scale out of the inside of the instrument so that it can not rot. I've had stuff come in that's over 100 years old in fantastic shape, and I've had stuff come in that's 10 years old in horrendous shape. And a lot of time that's due to people never doing anything to their instrument. And once your horn is rotten, there's not much you can do with it besides replace the part or put a patch over it. But once it starts to rot, it's usually the end is near. But yeah, so that's kind of what I just wanted to talk about really quickly, and just to let you guys know what was going on with these horns. If you have any questions about either maintenance that you can do, or questions about the instrument itself or how things are made, I think later on we're going to do a little question and answer, and I'm happy to answer any of that. So Bernard, I think that's about all I need to talk about. But if there's something else you want me to cover, I'm happy to do that too. But there you go.
Excellent. Thanks, Aaron. That is an awesome presentation.
Oh, hey, Jesse. Sorry. I thought it was
no, that's okay. All right. It was an amazing presentation that was full of lots of information. And we also have lots of questions already. So I know we will be asking you lots of things near the end of the session. But that is a good segue for us to move on to John Gough with Elemental Brass. And we're going to introduce John. John, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Well, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and you can go ahead and take it away.
All right, great. Well, I'm really happy to be here, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who's bringing me in. You know, the camp has meant a lot to me for many, many years. I went there, I think my big camp experience was in the summer of 2005, right as I was finishing high school. And it was an absolutely indelible experience that I'll never forget. I'm just honored to be a part of continuing that on. So I'll tell you a little bit about my shop. So my shop started about 4 years ago. And before that, I was a professional horn player. I still do freelancing and do gigs with Air Force Band here in Colorado. I used to play with an orchestra in Wuhan, China, and after that did some recording work in Beijing and some movie and soundtrack recording work in Nashville, and played a little bit in Europe as well. And while I was in Europe, I actually caught the bug for building horns. I was lucky enough to spend 3 or 4 days in Engelbert Schmid's shop. And I was playing on his horns at the time, and all I wanted was to get my horns worked on. And I was just amazed by what was in there and the way people could work with their hands. And to me, it was like breathing air for the first time. It just totally made sense and clicked. And so I decided to come back to the U.S. I got some formal training. I went to Houghton Horns, and I worked there for a year as an apprentice. And in my spare time, I, did research and learned everything that I could about brass repair and, horns and where horns came from and how they're built. And I was just totally hooked. And so after a year, I got engaged and moved out to Nashville, Tennessee, and I opened my business. And my wife was working on her doctorate out in Nashville, and so I moved out there so she could finish it, and just started from scratch. Bought a lathe, made all my mandrels, started, drawing tubes and lead pipes, and before you knew it, I had a horn, and, the rest is history. And so, one of the things that's been kind of a constant and that I wanted to talk about tonight is just this struggle we have as horn players that, it's kind of like golf. You can stand out there on the driving range and you can hit 500 balls and they all go in the exact same place. And then you go 50 feet to the right and go stand on your first tee and hit a ball and it hooks off to the left 100 yards. And, it's hard to know always what is me and what is the equipment, what's causing issues. Now, I want to preface this by saying, even though I'm someone who builds horns and sells instruments and equipment and all sorts of accessories and stuff, this is not something that I look to do at every opportunity. I think one of the biggest things that I notice about players that come into the shop and need a repair or are looking for a custom horn from me or want a new lead pipe or a mouthpiece, something of that sort, is that there's a simple issue that's going on with their horn, and they have no way of really deciphering how that has come about. And it could be something just as simple as, I dropped my horn, but it was in the case, and I can't really see any kind of issue with it, but now it plays differently, and I don't know why. And I've been struggling against my high range ever since, things like that. And so one of the things that I have learned over time is that there's generally three really big things that can affect a horn and don't really have to. One is leaks in the instrument itself, and that can come from a horn that's 70 years old and you've just been using it every single day and it's got a little hole in the lead pipe and eventually your hand's just worn through the brass. Or it could be a ferrule that the solder has come loose over time. Maybe it's just pushed one direction or another repeatedly by being put in the case, or it's just gotten old. That can also cause a leak in the horn. The other one would be a mismatch with the Venturi and the lead pipe and the end of your mouthpiece. Now, the Venturi is a very important spot. When you make a lead pipe for a horn, the lead pipe has a taper on the inside. It gets smaller at first for about the first 1.5 centimeters, and then it starts to get bigger as it goes through, and it becomes the bore size of the horn. The point at which it stops becoming smaller to receive the mouthpiece and becomes larger to accept the sound wave that's going through the horn is called the Venturi Point. And if your mouthpiece is not really lined up with that, let's say you've got a new horn and you've got the mouthpiece that you've wanted to use your whole life and that you love and you've never had an issue with, all of a sudden this horn that feel so great is having kind of issues. It may be that this is not lined up properly. Then the third issue is stress in a horn, and that is huge. Stress in any musical instrument, including the human voice, is a profoundly negative thing. So if I'm talking to you and I start to tighten my throat, all of a sudden you can't really understand what I'm saying. And all I've done is just tightened my throat. It would make it impossible to sing. If you took a piece of paper and draped it over a violin string as the player was playing, it would dampen the sound. Same thing with putting your hand on a string in a piano. Dropping an instrument doesn't always have to mean that there's a catastrophic event that could affect the horn. Most of the time when I see an issue with the horn not responding, not resonating really well, all of a sudden, the registers feel like they're different, comes from someone doing something as simple as just running into it while it was on their chair. Or they put it down, they put the case down and it rolls off the chair and it hits the floor, and there's just not enough of a difference for you to see a difference, but it's moved the valve section a little bit. Now remember, the valve section is the densest part of the horn. And brass and nickel silver are both relatively soft metals. So when a horn, even in the best of cases, hits the ground and stops, that valve section tends to continue moving. And what you'll end up seeing is stress in the instrument. And I remove stress all the time. In fact, I've lost custom horn sales before because I've had people come in and they say, I want to buy a new horn. And I say, well, what's wrong with your other one? And they show me and we talk about it. I pick it up and I can feel the tension. There's a hardness in the metal. And I heat up a couple braces with a torch and boom, it plays like new. All of a sudden, new horn isn't necessary. And I think that's the best way to really guide a repair. That's what I see my job as. So how to determine these issues? The leak is a very, very simple thing. If you have a detachable bell, you want to take your bathtub at home, and if you have a lacquered horn, you want to use lukewarm to reasonably cold water. You don't want to get it hot because that can remove the lacquer from the instrument, but cool water. If the horn is unlacquered, use warm water, get it to feel comfortable for yourself. And you'll need about 6 to 8 inches of water in there. And I like to get a little piece of rubber hose that I can fit snugly over the end of the lead pipe. You can get it at a local hardware store, and then cover the tail of the horn. Use like a kitchen sink stopper or just your hand if you've got big palms. And you'll sink the horn down into the water and blow through that tube while you're holding the other end of the horn. And if there is a leak, you will see it immediately. You want to blow pretty hard, but you'll see bubbles coming up from wherever that is. And that can cause a huge issue if you're playing. It can cause the horn to feel slippery. Sometimes you develop intonation issues, where things just really don't make sense. It feels like it's out of tune, and so, it's real sharp, so you draw the main tuning slide out, and then 15 minutes later you feel like you're really flat, and so you push it back in, but it's large distances and nothing really makes sense. That's usually from a leak. The other way to really tell if it's a leak somewhere in the horn or if it's a leak in the valves tends to be with a characteristic of the high and low register. When the horn is leaking through the valves, like the valves are old and worn, the high register tends to feel somewhat slippery, and your low register is going to feel very friendly. All of a sudden, the low register will feel very open, very friendly, very accommodating, but the high register feels like you're skating on ice, or some notes won't even come out right. Now, there is, as for determining if there's tension in the horn, someone like me, I can pick up a horn and generally just kind of feel it, feel where a horn, just feels dead. But someone who doesn't have that experience or exposure, you need to do a simple test. And if for those of you who know Bill Vermeulen's path studies, I like to take a note at the middle of the staff, like an E at the bottom of the treble staff, and I'll bend the note down until the horn actually grabs it. Now I'm going to put you on speakerphone, and hopefully this comes through. But so we start on an E. And you can hear that pop. I'm not trying to do anything pretty with the horn. I'm trying to get the horn to tell me what it wants to tell me. And what that horn is telling me is that it's very strong and it's not leaking. It's going to grab the note, it's going to grab that sound wave and shove it to the next partial. So it's going from that E. I keep bending it and supporting with air. Sorry. I keep bending the note and supporting with air, and then the horn will just grab it and slam it to the middle C. That means the horn's probably not leaking. Now, under tension. If the horn was under tension, that bend tends to just kind of feel like a slide whistle. You start bending and you go, it just feels weak. There's not really a pop at the bottom of it. And this is a pretty good indication. A lot of people say they feel like they're fighting against the horn in these kind of cases. Now, the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the Venturi and matching a mouthpiece to your Venturi properly. I know people really want to get in and tight with their mouthpiece, and they want to, hold on to it forever. Some people do. Other people like to experiment. I am an experimenter, but what I would say is that it's very important that the fit be right. Now, as a lead pipe gets older or a horn gets older, sometimes the Venturi can wear out over time. The receiver of the mouthpiece, the receiver of the lead pipe can wear out over time. If you're using the same mouthpiece, some people use just a regular, just raw brass mouthpiece. That metal's pretty soft, and the mouthpiece shank itself can wear out, causing the mouthpiece to go farther and farther in the horn. And the problem with that is if you've been playing that horn for 2, 5, 10, 25 years, those changes happen over years and years, and so you're not going to notice it right away. But one test that you can really do is before you go out and buy a new mouthpiece, or you go out and decide to buy a new horn, I like to take a small piece of paper. The paper does not need to be very wide, maybe about a 1/2 inch wide, and it's usually about an inch long. That should be exactly what you need. And what you're going to do is take this piece of paper, and it doesn't need to be thick. It can just be regular notebook paper, but you're going to wrap it around the very end of your mouthpiece, not so that it's poking out past the end of the mouthpiece shank, but so that it just wraps around that end. And you also don't want it to overlap. Once you've done that, then you're going to take that and stick that into the lead pipe of the horn. And what you'll notice is this is going to cause the mouthpiece to stick out a little bit farther. And this gives you information. And I am all about gathering as much information as possible before you go out and buy anything or make any drastic changes or decisions regarding your horn. What you want to do is play that horn normally and see what it feels like. Your high register that you're dealing with, does it feel more comfortable? If it feels more comfortable and slotty, does the low register still even exist? These kind of things really give you a lot of good information. A mouthpiece that typically goes too far in past the Venturi, you start to see, and especially on Geyer horns, I specialize in those, but you will see the G sharp, A, and B flat above the staff kind of tend to get a little rowdy. Typically, it feels like you can hit them, but they warble. You know, there's no way to really hit the center of the note if the mouthpiece is going in too far into the lead pipe. So you put that paper around there, you have it come out a little bit. Hey, that gets better. It feels much better. That's great. You know, the other thing too is, let's say that you've done the leak test on the horn. You know, the horn is popping. It doesn't really seem to be under tension, and you've backed it out a little bit, but it still feels like you're wrestling against the high register. That could be as simple as the mouthpiece actually needs to be more of a cup shape. And you know, the interesting thing about this is that I have these conversations all the time with customers and people who come into my shop who have misunderstandings about what affects the acoustics of the horn. They will take a mouthpiece that they believe needs to be more free blowing, and they get a bigger and bigger and bigger bore on the mouthpiece, but they're not considering the actual taper of the cup. These kinds of things are very important to consider, and without going down that road, because that's just a total quagmire, you know, I'll just say that I think these three tools, discerning if the horn is actually leaking, figuring out if the horn is under tension, and figuring out if you really have a good fit in the lead pipe for the mouthpiece, those can go an incredible distance in helping you discern if you really do need to go and talk to someone like me, or you know, someone like Aaron, and get, you know, new equipment, or get your equipment worked on, or if you just need to go spend more time working on coat brush. So I think that's pretty much what I was thinking about talking about. If there's I don't think there's anything else.
Great. John, thank you so much. That is all really good information and very informative. We've got about 42 questions in our Q&A, so that gives us a good opportunity to move right into that. Bernard, I know that you had a question that was posed to us earlier.
Yes.
Do you want to start with that, and then we'll get into our Q&A list here?
This is a question we got earlier. It says, I have a question for the guys who make horns. I ask it in advance, and it's probably something that the wider audience may not be interested in. I'd like to know if any horn manufacturer has experimented with using a different kind of finish on their horns other than lacquer, and specifically if any of them have experimented with PVD, physical vapor deposition. Is that something you guys ever experienced or ever used?
I do have a little bit of experience with that. When I first moved to Nashville, I actually was right down the street from a series of industrial factories and workshops, and one of them was a heat treating factory, and they also did vapor deposition. And they, you know, I had some lead pipes that I had made, and I had them actually do this process on a couple different lead pipes in a couple different materials. And I actually, to be perfectly frank, I think it's too complex of a answer for me to really give over the phone. But if this person wants to contact me directly, you could give them my email address. I mean, long story short, when you are adding mass to any kind of tube, it's going to have an effect on it. You know, it really depends on relative hardness of it, if the mass is actually even throughout the length of the tube, things like that. So.
Well, thanks. I know it was a pretty difficult question. I will send that email to you, John. And Aaron, if you don't mind, maybe I'll send it to you too, if you have any thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, most of the work we did was more with lacquer work and plating on how that affected the sound. We did Fourier transforms afterwards to see how it changed the waveform and what percentages it changed it. But we never tried PVD.
Okay. Jesse, do you want to ask, pick a question from the lineup here?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the most upvoted question with 39 votes and I'm going to direct this at John for this question. John, can you talk a little bit about giving your horn a bath?
Yeah. It's pretty straightforward. The biggest thing you want to be careful of is, does your horn have lacquer or does it not have lacquer? If your horn doesn't have lacquer, congratulations. Make the bath nice and hot. You and the horn can have a spa night in your bathroom. Basically what you want to do is, or what I like to do is, I'll use my ultrasonic cleaner, but before I had this shot, I would take all the slides out of the horn, and I would get kind of a bucket that was filled with warm soapy water, and that was usually Dawn dish soap. Then I get a snake or like a mouthpiece brush out, and I like to make sure that I'm using a snake that doesn't have any exposed metal. Usually they have twisted metal wire on the inside, and at the very end there's kind of a sharp end, and that'll scratch up the inside of your horn. So you want to look for something without that. But I will submerge the valves or the slides in the soapy water bucket, and then I'll take a little cup and I'll pour that warm soapy water solution into the valves, and I just move them around until my heart's content, just forever. A good 5 or so minutes. I like to get everything out of there. Then I pour the soapy water kind of on the horn, and I rub it all over with like a cotton cloth. Then once I'm done with that, I drain out the tub, and I just rinse the thing off inside and out with just clean water. I like to turn on the tub faucet, or if you have a spray head, you can use that too. It's a little bit easier if you have like a faucet that will actually have a lot of water just pouring out of it. You pour that into the valves, make sure that no bubbles or suds are continuing to come up. Then take all the slides that have been soaking in that bucket and make sure to scrub the actual slide legs off with the rag. And then I take the snake, and I go through all the tubes and everything and make sure there's nothing that's left in there. Then we go through and just rinse everything off. And like I said before, if your horn is lacquered, it's basically the exact same thing, except you want to cool down the water temperature, and you want to limit the amount of time that it's actually in the water. So don't leave it soaking in there for like an hour, hour and a half. Even if you're using cold water, that could still have an effect on the lacquer. So 15, 20 minutes, no problem.
Great. Thank you, John. I know that's kind of a big question to sum up quickly, so I hope you all wrote down those steps that you said. If not, you could probably reach out to John on his website. Now, the next upvoted question I'd like to direct towards Aaron. It says, are there any horn kits with the tools you showed that you recommend? This is coming from Kelly Iyer. Hopefully I pronounced your name right. And I specifically was curious about the mallet you were using and that little thing that looked like a wine cork. Those as well. So.
Sure. I make a set. I'm sure other people make a set too. It's also stuff you can also just find at the hardware store if you choose. I put them together just because it's easier to just get one then, but you can just put them together too. You can, if you want to put it together yourself, just talk to your local shop and you can get the bumper material and stuff like that. The string, like I said, you can get from a fishing supply place, and the wood is just a wood dowel. That thing that looked like a cork. It's just a wood dowel with a hole in it. I sell them. I'm sure other people sell them too. But it's just nice to have kind of some simple tools in your case in case you need an emergency. But, I sell them. Other people do too. That's the quick answer.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Bernard, do you want to pick a question?
Sure. Well, another highly upvoted question is, what would you do to deep clean a mouthpiece? Maybe I'll direct this back at Aaron as well.
If you want to do it yourself, you can, same thing like John had mentioned, you can put in warm water with some soapy water with a mouthpiece brush. If you let it sit in there for a while, it'll usually break it down. The other thing, if it's really disgusting, you can also just take it to a shop and it'll take them about 10 minutes to make it look good. You can put it in vinegar as well. That'll help break down stuff if there's a lot of calcium and lime on it. Mouthpieces don't usually get that way unless you let it sit for a long time and it was wet before you put it away. But usually if you just put it in some soapy water, let it sit for a while and use a brush, that'll get the goop out of it. If it's silver plated and it turns black, there's lots of different little silver polishes you can use by hand and scrub it down if you so desire. Just be careful because some of those will take off the finish as well. So there's 3M makes one that works pretty well, and a couple other companies too. But the shininess doesn't really matter, to be honest. It's more about getting the gunk out of it. And a little tub of warm water and some soap and a brush usually works pretty well.
Is there a way to prevent mouthpieces from tarnishing, or does it really matter?
It doesn't really matter, but 3M makes a tarnish strip that if you wanted to do that, it's just a little, looks like a little piece of black paper, and you can put it in there next to your mouthpiece and that'll help it slow down. It's not that big a deal. The tarnish isn't going to hurt. Typically, you're going to hurt anybody. It's more of the raw mouthpiece.
Or you could get a gold-plated mouthpiece.
You could get it gold-plated.
That wouldn't tarnish. John, so we have a question from Alan Reed that reads, wolf notes and notes that refuse to speak. What technology and procedures are available to diagnose and cure wolf notes and notes that refuse to speak?
Well, there's a couple different things. There is actually, there's a piece of equipment that you can actually get right now. I don't own one because it's far too expensive, but a lot of, I know, larger companies do have these. But it's basically a device that emits a series of frequencies in the lead pipe of the horn, and then there's a microphone on the other end, and it basically sends these series of amplitudes through the horn, and then it just deciphers them on the other end. And I've always thought that was absolutely amazing. It has the capability of really telling you exactly, like a measurable distance, where in the horn there is an acoustic issue. Now, I mean, you can have wolf note issues and things like that where they just, and it's hard to find a horn that genuinely has a wolf note, but typically when people are talking about a wolf note, what they're actually talking about is a note that's just not resonating. And typically what I've found is that a note like that, that's an issue with there's some kind of, there's a tension somewhere in the horn, a brace that's really under tension, or someone's put a big dent in a tube, but typically that's not really going to affect it unless you get it right on the nodal point for that note.
I have another question I want to ask, and it's from the list. It's not as horn makers. Timothy Smith asks, for students that are purchasing their first horn, I feel that many times students and parents get turned off by the price of a really fantastic instrument and may not be suitable. How would you say is the best way to show a potential customer or parent that the instrument is worth it? Did you guys hear me? Or did I cut out?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you cut out a little bit, but I think we got the gist of the question.
Yeah, I got most of it. I mean, I'm happy to chime in this, and I'm sure John will chime in it too. For a student that's beginning on an instrument, they're typically not going to be buying a horn that's worth over $10,000 or close to $10,000. It's going to be a lower end horn, like a Yamaha or a Kahn. A lot of times I get people come in and they say, well, can't I just go buy this instrument? It's $300. It's brand new. So typically what I'll show them is one that's made like that and the issues that it has. And then I'll show them an instrument that was made well, and then I'll show them the retail price of them after they're used as well. Typically a well-made instrument after it's used for a while is going to sell for similar to what you bought it for, whereas a poorly made instrument is going to be worth $0 after you're done with it. And that's a discussion I have all the time with parents when they come in with a student and they're trying out something. And, the biggest thing is to try them out and see which one works the best, number one. but then also to know how it was made is a good thing to know. A good shop in your area can usually tell you that. When I went to repair school after college, Yamaha used to donate stuff to the repair school all the time, and they'd circle the flaw on the instrument that they sent because they couldn't sell it, and the flaw would be so minimal that other huge name brand companies would let that go out the door as a finished product. So there's something to be said about that. But it's easy to show somebody, you know, this is the used price of that instrument after 10 years. This is the used price of the other instrument after 10 years. And you can tell right then what it's going to, it's not like a car. It's not worth half when you drive off the lot.
Yeah, that's exactly the same metaphor that I like to use. I mean, you know, once you get into a place where you have a student who's looking at an instrument that may take them through all state in high school or into college or maybe even in their professional life, you know, they're going to be switching instruments. They're going to want to upgrade, maybe, you know, mess around over time, or maybe they're really lucky and they can buy a really nice instrument right away. But most people are looking for, okay, well, he really loves music, she really loves music and wants to continue doing this for the next, until the end of high school or the end of college. And then we're going to want to sell it, but they really play well and they've gotten all state this year or whatever. Usually my advice to someone like that is think about it like an interest-bearing savings account. If you can afford to get into the $3,000 to $4,000, sometimes even closer to $5,000 range, chances are you're going to be able to get something like a Yamaha 667 and then take it over to a shop like mine or Aaron's, and we can put a custom lead pipe on it, and boom, this horn that you got for, you know, a mid-range price is going to play well enough to get you all the way through high school and college. And then when you go to decide to be a dentist or, you know, whatever, you can sell it, or you could sell it and upgrade, or you could just continue to play it as long as you want. I think that's a very important thing that people miss, is they think of these items as being depreciative items, and that is certainly the case. You can find horns that are not made well, are made out of poor materials, or have just been horribly mistreated and repackaged as something better than what they are. And yeah, I think it's important to get a better instrument, maybe not a $10,000 one, but yeah.
Good advice for investing in a good horn that's going to last a while, as long as you take care of it, which is what Aaron pointed out earlier. If you don't take care of a good horn, it's not going to do you a lot of good in the long run. Aaron, what is a safe way, this question comes from Tammy Kosinski. What is a safe way to remove a stuck slide?
There's a couple things you can do. I'll grab a horn right here and it's easier to show you. Hang on one sec. So in the shop, usually we use a cord kind of like this. This is just a piece of strapping material. It's just cotton. So on this horn, say the second slide was stuck, I could put it through the crook of it. Don't put it on the loop on the end, because a lot of times what you do, if you put it on this end piece, you'll rip it out. It's better to go through where the crook is. So you'd put it through there, and then you'd grab it on the other side. John had mentioned this before. It's good to hold on to the valve casing too, so you don't damage the casing of the horn when you do this. My little prop now that holds my horn is falling. So basically then you'd hold on to the casing, and that way it won't put tension on the valves, and you'd pull on it, and it typically will come out. If it doesn't, you can use a rawhide mallet like we had talked about before, and you can lightly tap the slides. If that doesn't work, go to a shop. They'll do it for you. It's not hard to do, but it's something that's, you know, it's easy to damage your horn quickly if you're putting too much pressure on it. And if you're stuck, that's a good way to do it. You can use a t-shirt, but usually something to the crook of it. Again, you want to put it in this crook section, not in the loop. If you put it in the finger hole, it'll usually rip this piece off completely. You can also try wiggling it, like if it's your first or third, you can try tilting it side to side first. and then giving a pull. Often common if you push this up and down, often that'll break the tension, and then you can pull it out as well. But if it's really, really hard stuck, shop, they're typically going to put some penetrate after one that'll help the oil get in there, and then eventually it'll break free.
Okay.
I'd like to add something to that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Well, this is actually along the same lines of damaging your own horn, which is what Aaron brought up. And Aaron, you may actually have to visually demonstrate this, but I have fixed so many twisted bell tails where someone gets their detachable bell stuck, and they got to get out the door, and they take the horn in the left hand and they take the bell in the right hand, and they just turn it as hard as they can, and then all of a sudden it twists like a Twizzler. I mean, it's really terrifying to see. And the thing is, it is so easy to dislodge a bell very safely. Basically, what you're going to want to do is you take the body of the horn, gently cradle it between your legs, and then put a little bit of tension, just a little bit, on the bell in the direction that you would normally turn it, and lightly tap the bell ring with a rawhide mallet or something similar, and it'll just pop. It'll start moving.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. That brings us to the end of our session. We should wrap up here. We sincerely appreciate you guys being our guests today. And thank you, John, for bearing with us with the internet outages that you're experiencing, but we're glad that you could call in and be a part of this with us.
I'm so happy to. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So appreciative of you guys. So grateful for you guys. Thanks for your time.
Hey, thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, I want to reiterate, Aaron and John, we really appreciate your expertise. I just wanted to finish up this session with an announcement for the sessions we have going for tomorrow. We're starting at 10 a.m. again with our fearless leaders, Bernard and Jesse, for our guided warm-up. We will also be doing a faculty session at 11:30 a.m. featuring Lauren Becker, and she will be talking about practicing. At 2 p.m., Robert Hoyle will be doing a Back to Fundamentals session. At 4 p.m., William Purvis will be doing a masterclass. At 6 p.m., I will be back here moderating a session on the Alexander technique with Stasia Sienna. And tomorrow is one of my favorite nights for evening sessions. Is going to be first a performance by the U.S. Army Field Band, and then our clam night. And our clam night is always looked forward to by those of us on staff, where we get to have a little bit of fun and joke around just a little bit. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I disappeared, I'm sorry. In the meantime, we'd like to, all right, it's fine. We'd like to ask that you use your hashtag KBHC 2020. Thanks, everyone. And subscribe to our YouTube page by searching for Kendall Betts Horn Camp. You can also find us on Facebook using @KB_Horn_Camp and Instagram using @official_KBHC. We encourage you to post to social media using our hashtag. So we'll see you all tomorrow online, and thank you so much for attending this day 2 of the online KBHC experience. And we hope you join tomorrow.